cheap microphone and an old guitar. I'm a big star at a local bar with a cheap microphone and an old guitar. Cheap microphone and an old guitar. Cheap microphone and an old guitar. I'm a big star at a local bar with a cheap microphone and an old guitar. Oh, I never know. Oh, it helps to soothe my soul.
It's Friday, October 22nd, and you are tuned into Real Talk. Thanks for making time for us today. I want to start today's show with an email. This from Anne, who took the time to chime in to talk at ryanjesperson.com. She says, Ryan and the gang, I thought you might want to know about a withdrawal I made through Bitcoin Well the other day. She said, as you may or may not know, putting funds in is easy, but taking them out has been a real challenge to most. Can I get some sexy, awesome email music for my Bitcoin Well email here at the beginning of the show? It's so much better to read emails with music beds underneath. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the Real Talk studio band to give me a little something to get excited about. Anne says, this withdrawal I made through Bitcoin Well the other day, as you may or may not know, putting funds in is easy, but taking them out, when it comes to cryptocurrency transactions, that's been a real challenge to a lot of people. And then in all caps, so I'll reflect that, she says, not anymore. Bitcoin Well makes it a totally seamless process. By the way, I checked and does not work at Bitcoin Well. She says you put in the request, you select American or Canadian funds, you give them your Bitcoin wallet information, your email address, and boom, done. In a day or two, you get this email, funds attached, you deposit it in your bank account. Says Anne, her words, not mine. Even an old goat like me could understand the process. Anne says, it's easy as pie, and I would recommend it to anybody and everybody. Yes, they answer your questions about putting money in, and we all need to know how to do it, but it's the ability to take it out seamlessly that impressed me. Says, I remember the olden days where there were 1 million steps in the early days of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and if you screwed up, you could actually lose your funds. But Bitcoin Well has made it so easy, she says. Just saying, Ryan, it's a great company offering great service, and I'm thankful they're right here in Alberta. If anybody has a challenge or a question to ask, that from Anne. You know it. Thanks for being in touch, Anne. You can find the team at Bitcoin Well under the sponsors tab on our website, ryanjesperson.com.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
All right, we're going to get into it today. I love this. Can we call up that tweet that we got just from New Brunswick this morning? This one I saw. I love this from a Real Talker yesterday. That was obviously this Allan Inquiry comes out. I think people across Canada to a certain degree are interested in this. Is it fair to call it a witch hunt? We'll ask Simon Dyer from the Pembina Institute in a second if it's fair to call it a witch hunt. But this was the investigation, the $3.5 million investigation into anti-Alberta activities released yesterday. And Lucy tweeted, she said, I can't wait for Jespo's take tomorrow. There's lots to unpack on this shit show in Alberta. And then we heard from G. Marie, who says, I've been tuning into Real Talk lately. I'm in New Brunswick now. So a big shout out to New Brunswick. A good morning to you. Thanks for making time for us. The report out yesterday, is it fair to say much ado about nothing? $3.5 million, a big campaign promise from Jason Kenney, who said they were going to shine sunlight, essentially disinfect these big foreign campaigns to landlock specifically Alberta oil. But after extension after extension, delay after delay, more and more cash, yesterday, nothing. Or at least that's my impression. But let's go to somebody who's been following this from the beginning. Obviously, I wonder if his organization was one of those that perceived they might be in the crosshairs. Simon Dyer's joining us, Deputy Executive Director of the Pembina Institute, a Canadian-based clean energy think tank. Simon's been working in this wheelhouse, this natural resource management issues since 1999, the better part of 20 years and making his Real Talk debut this morning. Thanks for making time for us. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. And based here in Edmonton, too.
Good stuff. So obviously you're paying attention to this over the past couple of years. And I have to wonder if you and your team at the Pembina Institute are going, oh boy, are we one of the ones that are going to take big punches here on a national stage? What was your thought process going into this? Let's say pre-yesterday, pre-release. Where were you at with regards to this Allan Inquiry?
Well, I mean, I think we knew we were in the crosshairs because when this was launched at a press conference 2 years ago, the Premier and Minister Savage, they named us, and there were quite a few slurs about what they were going to find. I mean, and I think that's the biggest thing, finding of no wrongdoing anywhere, and you can compare that to how this was launched. They were going to find evidence of defamation, look into illegal activities, musings about Russians, hundreds of millions of dollars. None of this obviously is true, and none of this came to pass. So, I mean, we've been confident throughout this process, but unfortunately, and I think you saw it in the press conference yesterday, even though there were no findings of wrongdoing, the minister continues to polarize this discussion, and it's deeply distressing. I mean, obviously, it's trying to take advantage of the recession and the frustration. People are losing their jobs and just trying to create an enemy here, pitting working Albertans against the environmental community. It makes no sense. The world is changing, and I don't know any environmentalist that is, rooting for people in Alberta to lose their jobs. It's actually quite the opposite. They're trying to figure out how can we get to net zero emissions in a way that protects our workers, but we have to address climate change.
Simon, I think you make a really good point about there were the report's findings released yesterday, and then there were the statements from the minister, and I think a lot of people were wondering, are we talking about the same report? 600 plus pages. I pulled one quick paragraph out of it. Here's Steve Allen's take, quote, "To be very clear, I have not found any suggestions of wrongdoing on the part of any individual or organization. No individual or organization, in my view, has done anything illegal. Indeed, they have exercised their rights of free speech." And then here's the minister yesterday.
As each pipeline project was delayed or canceled, while they boasted, Albertans were hurt. People lost their jobs, businesses went under, families were hurt, government revenues from royalties were impacted. We lost billions of dollars in royalties. We saw pipeline bottlenecks, and that led to heavy discounts and led to curtailment. While other jurisdictions were able to build infrastructure, we have been deliberately blocked. Albertans have a right to be upset.
Albertans have a right to be upset, she says, and I think a lot of Albertans are, although maybe not for the same reasons that Minister Savage might think. You've got a report that literally says after 2 years, $3.5 million, there was no evidence of wrongdoing on the part of any person and nothing illegal. And the minister's still up there yesterday doubling down. Premier nowhere to be found, by the way. What's going on right now? What's your take?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, I guess the other important thing, the way the whole report is framed, it's sort of framed as this sort of reverse David and Goliath thing about this massive environmental community picking on the little oil and gas industry. I mean, according to the data in this report, I mean, you're talking about investments in oil and gas and climate change in Alberta on the order of $3 million a year for 15 years. Now, I mean, $3 million might sound like a lot to you and me, but when you compare that with $250 billion of capital investment in the oil sands industry, a decade ago, and you compare it to, I mean, I remember watching Hockey Night in Canada with wall-to-wall ads from oil sands companies. I don't know whether the oil sands company PR and lobbying departments have spent 100 times more or 1,000 times more than the environmental community. I mean, that has never been researched, but clearly it's very odd that this government of Alberta continues to think it's their job to defend the oil and gas industry that should do their own PR. And really, the real issue is about environmental performance. And even the recommendation that we should just rebrand and throw more money at this is absolutely not what we need to do. That's the definition of insanity. The reason that Alberta is criticized, of course, is because we don't have a climate plan. We've made no 2030 commitments. We're out of the mainstream conversation on net zero. And it seems like, when you're in a hole, stop digging. But the government of Alberta seems to not be getting that message.
Do you think that people were exonerated? I want to ask you a question, but I think I already know the answer. Is that, do you think some people were sweating through this? Because I think that some individuals and some organizations certainly felt like the crosshairs were on them, that they were about to take some punches, that there could be, in some circumstances, either a groundswell of public disdain or something further action-wise from the government on this, whatever that might be. But were people or were organizations exonerated yesterday?
Well, I mean, I think so, but I guess you can still do a lot of damage in the court of public opinion. Like, I mean, obviously, I can't speak for sort of everyone in the environmental community, but I think people were pretty confident there was no wrongdoing. But when you have the governor of Alberta and the premier using his position as a bully pulpit to, harass and defame individuals, I mean, it has an impact. I mean, in the past 2 years, right? I mean, Pembina, I mean, we focus on solutions. We focus on factual information. We've been working on oil sands issues for 30 years. And when you have the sitting government, attacking you and actually reaching out to, our funders and even, oil sands companies that we work with saying, stop working with these guys, it has an impact. So yeah, it's not helpful. I mean, there's certainly been an impact, and it's been really gratifying to see, regular Albertans reaching out and making donations and sort of standing up for us. But it has an impact, but only the government can change this sort of hostile, polarizing tone and actually move on. Yeah,
I mean, only the government can change it because it's the government pushing it out, I guess. There was kind of a notable exchange yesterday. If you're listening to this on the podcast, you're going to hear it. It's just an audio blip, but I want you to listen to what happens with the minister when she hears that there's a reporter from the New York Times that wants to ask her something. This is Sonia Savage yesterday at the media availability. You'll see it on YouTube. And then Simon, I got a question for you on what this all means. But here's the brief exchange yesterday, a reporter from the Times and Alberta's energy minister.
Thank you, Ian Austin, New York Times.
Big smile on the face of the minister.
Go ahead.
She's excited. And here it is.
Ian.
The $925 million, I'm a little puzzled. You talk about transparency a lot, but it looks like the inquiry came up with that number by doing something that any Canadian or anyone in the world can do, going to the Canada Revenue Agency charity site and adding up the numbers. So what exactly more transparency do you want? I mean, we know these groups appear at regulatory hearings, for example. Did you want, like, some law that they have to report specific Alberta things? And if that's what you want, should publicly traded energy companies and energy groups also be required to report what they spend on legal fees at regulatory hearings, what they spend on lobbying, advertising, and so on?
And they mostly do. It's called...
Okay, so that's the point. I wanted to get to the question. The answer is a bunch of word salad, a bunch of gobbledygook. If you want to comment on it, Simon, you certainly can. But it prompted this tweet from the former editor of Alberta Oil magazine, Max Fawcett, which jumped out at me. He quotes and platforms Alanis Morissette here, reminding us all of that song. Isn't it ironic? Like rain on your wedding day. But Max says, let me get this straight. The government of Alberta wants environmental NGOs, ENGOs, to be more transparent in their disclosure, but they won't tell taxpayers anything about how the War Room's budget is being spent, nor will they allow journalists to FOIP its activities. Is that a fair comparison? Seems so to me.
Absolutely. I mean, environmental charities are already more transparent than the War Room, and already more transparent than the lobbying activities of the oil and gas companies. So yeah, having a level playing field would actually involve increasing transparency in some of those sectors. And I guess the other point about charities as well, the Muttart Foundation put out some excellent research yesterday. 1% of international funding in Alberta is for environmental charities. 99% is for other charities, the biggest ones, educational and religious. So again, if this government is serious about this, they seem to sort of take a specific interest in charities that might have a different public policy position to them. And so yeah, I mean, it's pretty hypocritical.
The average person is going to wonder, so what do I take away from this? Like if the kids are at hockey practice this weekend, or if friends are getting together around a campfire and somebody says, how about that Allan Inquiry? And these real talkers, they want to, we want to be the smartest people in the room, but we never want to act like it, Simon. But what's one thing that we can comment on here? What's the thing that what's most notably out of this? What's the takeaway?
It was a waste of money. It didn't uncover any information that isn't available through the CRA website or a Google search on publicly information about what these groups are working on. It's, I think it was designed for political purposes to, make people angry and frustrated. And I think, the government of Alberta is going to continue to struggle and is going to lose in the court of public opinion if we don't get serious about taking action on climate change. That's what it comes down to. I mean, global leaders are in Glasgow in 9 days' time, and they're all going to be, accelerating and enhancing their climate commitments. And Alberta is just not in the game. They can't, the minister, you should ask the minister, do you commit to reducing emissions? Do you believe in the 1.5 degree target? Is Alberta taking it seriously? And the rest of the world just sees Alberta not taking this seriously. It's just a massive own goal.
Simon, I suspect you're going to say, Ryan, I'm not really looking to pick fights with other organizations, but I have to bring up Ducks Unlimited, right? I mean, this report suggests that there's been about $1 billion that has made its way into Canada, into Alberta in particular, for environmental campaigns against the pipelines, against the oil sands. About $400 million of that has been funneled to Ducks Unlimited. Now, the CEO of Ducks Unlimited, Larry Kalmeyer, is Jason Kenney, the Premier's former principal secretary. And this report from Deloitte shows that a lot of information, including information about Ducks Unlimited, has been redacted. In layperson's terms, they've taken a Sharpie and scribbled it out so people can't read it. What gives?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a big fan of Ducks Unlimited. I'm a hunter. They do great work in the conservation space, and I'm not looking to,
I don't think any of us are looking to fight with Ducks Unlimited.
Exactly, but the point is, it's a very dangerous state of affairs when the government is picking charities and non-for-profits that it likes and ones that it doesn't like, and sort of redacting that information. So it's. There was no story here, but it does suggest that this inquiry, the government decided beforehand who their targets were. They'd already written their press release for the end about who they wanted to focus on again, and unfortunately the report didn't give them the results that they wanted to, because there's no smoke or fire here.
I'm a big fan of Graham Thompson, longtime political commentator in the province of Alberta. He writes yesterday for the CBC, the awkward reality for the Premier now is that his fight back strategy unveiled through the 2019 provincial election has only scored a hit against one target: his own government's credibility. The War Room has been such a joke. Its logo should be a plastic flower that squirts water. And the Allan Inquiry into anti-Alberta activities found no evidence of wrongdoing, while offering up a jumble of financial information that even Minister Savage admitted had her confused at times. This is pretty interesting to read from the report. When it comes to that so-called War Room, the Canadian Energy Centre, the findings published yesterday, or at least, released yesterday, quote, the War Room solicited mixed reviews. Strong oil and gas advocates were in support of this defensive strategy, while people on the fence, hungry for more knowledge of the skeptics, were highly critical. The name change to the Canadian Energy Centre may have been a strong strategic move, but unfortunately it was too late to undo the damage. It is still widely referred to as the War Room. In addition, several missteps from the outset damaged its reputation, from which it has not yet been able to recover. What does the future look like when it comes to the War Room?
I mean, I think the government should save money and cancel it. It's had no tangible benefit. As I said, over the past 20 years, respective governments of Alberta have perpetually treated criticism of the oil sands as a public relations issue when it's actually an environmental management and environmental policy issue. The War Room can't defend you when emissions are increasing and Alberta doesn't have a climate plan. So, do the public policy first, then communicate. Alberta missed the improving public policy step and went straight to communication. So save the money, stop spending money on PR, get serious about climate action, engage with your critics rather than harassing them. And that's the way to actually support investment in Alberta and decarbonisation and the strong economy that we all want and a safe climate.
Simon, let me ask you this in closing. Sam, do you mind calling up the cover art for this report, the 600-page report from Steve Allen? You'll note, if you take a look at it, and anybody can access it online, that there it is, the report of the public inquiry into anti-Alberta energy campaigns, July 2021. Oh, wait a second. wait a second, it's the middle, it's almost the end of October. What gives? All I can think is that, what was July? July was open for summer. July was best summer ever. July was the stampede. July was when this government was supposed to win favor back from its citizens. Then what happened? Right, the federal election. And then what just passed? The municipal election. Right, the equalization referendum. Am I a conspiracy theorist? I mean, why did this thing get to the government in July, not released to the public until yesterday?
Well, exactly. I mean, I think they waited to the last possible moment because there's nothing here. The rationale for this inquiry has been completely discredited, right? I mean, I don't think it's wouldn't hold our breath, but I mean, I think some people in government should be apologizing to some of the individuals and organizations who've been harassed and impugned through this process, even though the inquiry itself obviously found no evidence of wrongdoing. We've yet to see the government themselves, acknowledge any of that or, walk any of this back.
I'm sure that an apology will happen in short order, Simon. I'm sure that'll happen right away if I know anything about this government. Our guest leading us off this morning was awarded in 2013 with the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for his work to support environmentally responsible energy development in the province of Alberta in the country of Canada. He's the Deputy Executive Director of the Pembina Institute, Simon Dyer. Thanks for making time for us, Simon.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. You can let me know what you think online. Hashtag is Real Talk RJ. The producer of this show is keeping an eye on that, Sarah Hoyles. And, of course, you can hit us up in our live chat or send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. We have Trash Talk coming up in, we'll call it about an hour's time, an hour and change. Hoyles, I would say we still potentially have time. I know you have a lot on your plate, a lot you're keeping an eye on. But if someone were to submit a last-minute Trash Talk on this, we could still probably squeak it in.
Yeah, I know some people.
Yes.
I can see what I can do.
We look for quick hits, not essays. And if somebody has one that you can hand to me cold, I'll read it.
Quick hits,
we'll
hot takes.
We're quick hits, hot takes. I love that. We could steal the Dairy Queen branding. Quick hits, hot takes. There's also going to be a new precedent today. I'm looking forward to Trash Talk. Are you ready to You ready to go? You got? I can't wait. I haven't seen it. Sarah promised us was this yesterday, a couple days ago. We got a Trash Talk coming about drones. I don't even know I don't know. I haven't seen it. Hoyles will take the spotlight in about an hour's time.
Oh, geez. Now you're ramping it up.
I'm building this up big time. I am building this up. If there's anything I can do, my friend, it is hype. If there's anything I can do, it is hype. Edmonton Councillor-elect Keren Tang, in just a second, I wanted to remind you that this show happens. We're here each and every morning for you because we have amazing partners and sponsors like the team at Athabasca University. They're Canada's online university. If you're looking to broaden your skill set, you want to deepen your understanding, you want to better prepare yourself for a job market that, hey, has seen a bit of a dip over the past couple of years, but that means opportunity abounds now. Why not figure out more about how AU works and how you might find your fit to learn at your own pace with their world-class accredited online programs and courses at athabascau.ca. You can check in with alumni. You can shop at the AU store. There's a whole bunch of great links right there for you, conveniently presented on the website. Our friends at Park Power want to remind you that you can choose a variable rate or a fixed rate. When it comes to these utilities they're providing, your friendly local utilities provider in the electricity, natural gas, and internet game. They also have the fixed rate, which has been a valuable asset for a lot of people that are looking for a little bit more predictability. They want to know what their bills are going to look like, and sometimes when you've been locking it in, you've come out a big winner, right? Here's the thing. There's limited spots every month for those fixed rates. So, as the first of the month approaches, you make sure you get in touch with them so you're not left on the outside looking in. If you are, you can always follow up. You can always change your account. You're never locked in. At parkpower.ca, the promo code 2021-RealTalk gets you $70 off your first bill. And finally, I know it's going to be a big weekend for our friends at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge because the word is out. The inventory is back, stocked up. They've been waiting literally a year and a half to be able to say this. The trailers have been rolling in. They've got more than 300 Dodge Ram 1500s, a whole bunch of Jeeps, the Grand Cherokees, the Wranglers. They've got those Gladiators everybody likes. And then, of course, everything else in that Dodge, Jeep, Chrysler lineup that everybody's come to love. October is the biggest sale of the year at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge. Well, of course, Monday night, big changes across our home province of Alberta. Each of the 5 biggest cities in the province, a new mayor, new faces on council, new dynamics at city halls across the province. And that includes right here in Edmonton. Over the next number of weeks and months, of course, we'll get to know some of these elected representatives. And that starts today with the winner, Edmonton's councillor-elect in the ward of Garihio, Keren Tang. Won her seat with more than 7,400 votes. That's just under 40%. She's an experienced public health advocate and is believed to be one of the first, anyway, women of color to serve on Edmonton's council. Keren, it's wonderful to have you on the show. First of all, congratulations. You've had a couple of days, I hope, to get some sleep because word on the street is that you've been pounding the pavement for months. How did Monday night feel?
It felt surreal, and thank you so much for having me on the show. Been a fan for a long time. Monday feels surreal. This moment, just kind of content and waiting for the big storm coming. We know that there's a lot of work to be done. We've had one day where I was kind of going around collecting lawn signs, and the next day where it's onboarding at City Hall. You just hit the ground running.
Keren, obviously, you've wanted this for a while. You ran in the last election. You finished second in your riding. The guy that won that time finished second to sit in the mayor's office, Mike Nickel, which meant that your riding essentially was wide open. People were trying to figure out who's got the edge here. Of course, you've been polling people on a door-to-door sense. You've been talking to constituents for, I'd say, the better part of the last 4 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what were people telling you about priorities, and how does that translate into what your priorities are now?
Yeah, and that is very much, I would say, how we develop our platform. As you said, I've been kind of at this it's not just a few months campaign, it's been years, since 2016. And so for the past few years, I've always kind of developed and maintained a lot of the relationships and connections with community groups, with people, particularly in Millwood. So this is a portion that kind of stayed between 11 and Garihio, and just maintain a lot of those conversations. And we've been having online virtual community conversations since last November. And of course, online coffees and meetings, et cetera, with community and industry leaders. And that actually ultimately shaped our platform. And then at the doors, folks validated it. This ward is separated north and south by the Henday, and you see some unique issues that people really care about. Millwoods is very mature from the 70s, so infrastructure and renewal is very big. And then on the south, you have the newer neighborhoods where issues of school capacity. In some cases, the lack of school, particularly high school, is kept coming up at the doors. But the one thing I would say that really connects north to south, east to west is an issue around mobility and transit. And in fact, I would say that was such a clarifying moment in this campaign on the trail, where so many people were talking to me about the bus network redesign, about the LRT, particularly seniors, students, lower income families, newcomer families who don't actually have cars to have that choice to drive. It made me just realize that, this has to be one of my priorities. And ultimately our platform had 11 priorities, and this was certainly up there.
Can you, we've been having some fascinating conversations around what reconciliation looks like, including just yesterday, talked to author Jesse Wente, and just a really powerful time spent, just really kind of digging into his new book, Unreconciled. I'd be interested to hear more, and I know our audience would as well, about the time that you spent stateside down, I think it was New Mexico, right? On a Navajo reservation, working with kids to stimulate interest in STEM fields, right? In math and science. And so how did that come about? And how does that influence your politics, or at least your priorities?
Yeah, that was my first job out of university. I participated in this program called Teach for America, where young people get deployed to different parts of the states, teaching particularly in very underrepresented and marginalized communities. And I picked New Mexico, actually not knowing exactly kind of who the demographic was, and that was really my first interaction with working with Indigenous communities. And prior to that, I really, growing up in the States, I didn't really have any of that education. and it's such an eye-opening and I would say very transformative experience that has put me where I am today. I was a science teacher. I was teaching 7th and 8th grade science. My students were 99% Navajo. It was just an incredible experience. I've learned so much from my students. During that period, I also was really looking to different kinds of extracurricular programs that could support my students' achievement, including this program called MESA, which I think was just fantastic. MESA stands for Math, Engineering, Science Achievement, and it's really meant to kind of stimulate. And it's not a gifted program, it's actually for everyone. And that's what I really loved about it. And I hope this program is still going on because it is so, so important.
Keren, I want to make sure my math is correct. You became a Canadian citizen in 2015, correct?
That's right.
And then 2017, you were already running for a seat on city council, which I think was really interesting. You've served as president of the Edmonton Multicultural Coalition. You've got a ton of experience, obviously, from an executive level and understanding some of the organizational approaches to providing supports for new Canadians, for in this case, new Edmontonians. But you also have lived experience, which I think is huge. We've heard from so many people, including mayors and the new mayors in Calgary and Edmonton this week, that talked about the value of having a council reflect its population. People can see themselves, in a sense, in their councillors. That's, I would imagine, not lost on you.
Absolutely. And, it's a big reason why I ran in 2017. And I think having my citizenship and being there for, that ceremony, it was a moment where I was like, wow, I can vote now for the first time in my life. I was in my early 30s. I'm like, this is my first time I'm going to vote. That was the year of the federal election. And then, a second later, I'm like, oh, wow, I can also run for office. That has never occurred to me. And it was just a very powerful moment. And even now, I come to the doors, I meet lots and lots of permanent residents. This ward, the Southeast, is incredibly diverse. I was there before. I was there at one point when I said, I can't vote and therefore this doesn't concern me. I don't want to get, involved, or I don't, it doesn't matter what I say. And now I know better and certainly encourage those who can't vote to say, things will affect your day-to-day life. And in fact, several years ago, as part of a campaign to even rally around the permanent resident vote in local elections. And that was, certainly during some of the changes that was happening with the Local Elections Authorities Act.
Keren, I know I'm curious, most elected politicians will give us an answer like, oh, it's not my brother, but I'm asking you to actually sink your teeth into something here. I'm asking you to maybe throw one punch, even if it's a gentle one. When you look at the previous Edmonton City Council, where did it drop the ball? I mean, what was something before you earned your seat, before you ran and won? What was something that maybe even drove you a little bit nuts about municipal governance in Alberta's capital city?
Just as a community organizer, I think the one thing that kind of drove me nuts is that disconnect. We have folks making the decisions, but oftentimes you show up to events and you may shake some hands, take some photographs. But certainly, I as someone who's on the ground, I didn't necessarily the same kind of relationships I had hoped, and that's something I certainly hope to bring and commit to. That I don't just want to show up and say hello or I don't want, folks to pander to or the politicians and vice versa. I want to form genuine relationships. I think it's about deep listening that I didn't necessarily see always. And I think part of that does come, and I think part of that does matter when you have a diverse council, because then we're talking about people who have very different kinds of networks, different kinds of connections, different kinds of communities that they can relate to.
In closing, I think people would be interested just for a bit of a peek behind the curtain on how this all goes. So when does it all start? I mean, have you had a chance to chat with the mayor-elect? Have you had a chance to meet with, Zoom or otherwise, who will form your colleagues on council? I mean, when does the real work begin? What's your timeline?
Yeah, so I think 2 days after we started onboarding, we were all at City Hall. I haven't had a chance with the mayor-elect to keep missing each other. He's a very busy man, of course, but certainly with the other folks on council, we've gotten to know each other where our offices are. And of course, swearing in is next Tuesday. And I believe it's followed by the inaugural council meeting.
Feeling pretty good about it? Feeling pretty excited?
I'm excited, and of course, this work is daunting, and I wouldn't have expected any less. And as no matter how much experience you have in here, this is a huge transition. I'm still trying to get my voicemail set up, so we'll see.
Hey, no voicemail is the new voicemail. Nobody's doing voicemail anymore. It's true. I mean, I know, that's Keren, right. You're going to say, hang on, the people put their faith and confidence in me, and the people gave me their vote, and I'm here to listen to them, and you got to say all that stuff. But the more executives that I try to learn from, they got rid of their voicemail years ago. So,
but you know what? There's a lot of seniors in the ward. There's a lot of people who still rely on the phone, and that still remains my preferred mode of contact. So you
like when people call you?
Yeah, I call people back. I call voters back. No. It is that time spent of crafting an email I'd rather spend talking to like a real person.
Yeah, no, you and I are the complete opposite. That's why you're well suited for public office, and I, my friend, am not. Let me say this in closing. I just want you to know, and I'm sure a lot of people have said this to you when you lost the last election. You know what I heard time and time and time again. She'll be there. People said she'll be there. She will be a counselor in Edmonton, and here you are. Congratulations!
That means a lot.
We were happy to open the door and have you walk in because I suspect that we're going to have conversations in the months and years to come. Congratulations from our team to yours.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You got it. That's Edmonton counselor-elect in the ward of Godillo. I feel like I'm mispronouncing it, but we're doing our best to learn these. Essentially, they're not really new, but the new-ish ward names previously would have been, and some of the boundaries redrawn, but would have been Ward 11-ish. Keren Tang is going to be serving them as a counselor and well-suited. Class act. I would be the guy. I mean, I would be. I hate to invoke the comparison. I shouldn't even say it out loud because somebody's going to pull this clip and then they're going to use it against me. But I might be kind of in one context or another, or maybe more than one. Should I just spit it out?
Say it.
I might have a bit of a Doug Ford kind of tendency when it comes to some of the management of relationships with the people.
Okay, you should not have said that.
I know. But I just feel like if there's any elected politician in Canada that probably doesn't have their voicemail set up, this is maybe unfair. It's probably Doug Ford.
But that's just because, ineptitude.
Well, yeah, or disinterest. Mine would be based on disinterest. I have, and I'm not talking about like family. I'm not talking about my family, my wife, my parents, my cousins, and my sibling. I'm not talking about that. But if it's people that we do business with, or if it's people that I know casually, people that I'm doing, and they call me, I'm looking at my phone, and I'll be honest, I get irritated. Like when the phone, all they're doing is calling me. That's a normal thing to call someone on their phone. But I'm like, come on, as my phone's ringing. Like, why aren't they saying? I feel like if they sold a phone that could not receive calls,
yes, that
would be my phone.
Which is hilarious that you're calling it a phone, but yeah, that it wouldn't accept calls. I love when my folks call me and I miss it anyways. And then they're.
You just got buzzed. You screen your parents' calls, don't you, Hoyles? Oh, my. I hope they're not listening.
And then I call them back. I'm just going to move right past that. Then I call them back and so did you listen to my message?
Yeah.
No,
I don't even know.
I never listened to the message.
I don't even know my password. I don't even know No. Are you a voicemail guy, Sam? I mean, bigger picture, are you a talk on the phone guy?
Bigger picture, I'm a talk on the phone guy. I like to talk on the phone when I'm ready for it. Yes, I kid you not.
Got
yesterday,
a little buzz on or what?
I was in a. Yesterday, I was in a Zoom meeting, and right before the meeting, I phoned my mom for something, and she didn't pick up, and that's fine. That's normal. And literally,
I love how we're all treading so carefully.
During the meeting, both of my parents phoned me back, and both of them just left voicemails that said, "Hey, saw you called. Please call me back." And it was like, this is the most pointless voicemail.
Yeah, I don't know. Nobody listens to voicemails anymore. Do not leave me a voicemail ever. And I would say, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to cancel my voicemail. But the fact of the matter is my to-do list is way too long, and I never get to the bottom of it. So what I'm going to do is instead of canceling it, I'm just going to keep ignoring it. So if you're waiting for me to return your call, it's not going to happen. Jonathan says, I need a Palm Pilot. Whatever happened to Palm Pilots? That's another great band name.
They got replaced by Blackberries and then iPhones.
Yeah, Palm Pilots.
I don't
what
actually
a blast
know.
from the past.
I don't actually know what were they?
They were they were the things that they were like, essentially they looked like a tablet, like early stage. They kind of looked like remember the TI-82 or TI-81 Texas Instruments calculators?
Yeah, they're a little slimmer than that.
Yeah, and then they had the little pen thing that pulled out the writing utensil,
Right.
or not utensil, the writing instrument, and then you could do it. It was actually pretty innovative for its time because it was taking your sloppy handwriting and turning it into text, which was, I think, pretty impressive. At the time, anyway.
It was incredibly impressive. And they were huge at the time because you're right, they couldn't make phone calls, but they had your calendar and they had all your contacts and they had your schedule in it, and they, you could make notes on them and that kind of stuff. So it's like there was the first sort of massive put this in your pocket and keep all your information on it gizmo.
And people wanted, and when you had one, you wanted everybody to see you using it.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, no big deal. It's like the people that used to have the original car phones. You remember those? The ones that would you would carry them. You'd carry them like a purse, it was like a briefcase, and then you'd plug it into the lighter and use this massive phone with the red LED. It would actually make the noise when you'd punch in the meep as you're dialing the number. Unbelievable. Now, I will say it's important here. It's important to recognize that there is still some value in voicemails. Like Tony here, she says, my mom always leaves me a voicemail like she's having a conversation with me, and it's so cute. If I still had my grandparents on my voicemail, I would save that for eternity. There are voicemails that you cherish, obviously. But it's like for me, if you're leaving a message like, call me back when you can, okay, I'll talk to you next Christmas. People are saying, James' journey was Palm Pilot to BlackBerry to iPhone. Shalane still is rocking a landline. She says it's for when my kids are home alone, but I'm always so annoyed when somebody calls me on it. That from Shalane. I don't blame her.
Do you have a landline?
No, I haven't had a landline for 15 years, literally.
It's interesting.
More than 15 years.
Yeah, because my sister, as their kids got older and yet now they're able to stay home alone, they have a landline for that specific purpose. So there's actually a way for them. So they had to get a landline.
Yeah. A lot of, Kim is with me, says, I hate the phone. I always try to make sure that everybody is relevant. If you take the time to give me a whole bunch of extra A's in the word hate, or as our little guy calls it, the H word, he'll say, Dad. Oh, no. He'll lean in. I know I'm not supposed to say this, but I hate broccoli. I'm like, Wyatt Rudy. You can say you don't like it or you don't prefer it, but we save our hate for the Vancouver Canucks. Some random guy says, this is why I'm not running for office. I get far too much anxiety making cold calls to people. I'll be the same way. A summer of selling educational books door to door taught me life skills and also forever scarred me. No one, literally no one is happy to see you show up when you're door to door, when you're knocking on doors. Might be a little bit different, though, with politicians around election time, right? I know that some, love it. We heard that Councillor Andrew Knack loves knocking on doors. He knocks on doors outside his ward just to I don't know, because he cares what people think. Again, this is where I'd be the Dougie Ford, Jespo, when's the last time you knocked on doors? I don't know, when I needed to borrow jumper cables from my neighbor. But you're a city councilor. What gives? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. And then on a serious note, I appreciate this comment, and some of you are actually talking about, politics in the interview we just did, and that's fine too. Fatima says we're still missing a big piece on council. There's no black representation. She says I'm going to push for even more reflection of the representation of the population next term. Fair point.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, there were 33 votes that separated I love the last name Hoyle now I'm not going to remember the ward. My apologies. And they refused. Elections said, no, we're not doing the recount. And
You're talking about Rhiannon Hoyle, former president of the Alberta Party.
Thank you.
She was a great candidate. And how about Ahmed Ali, former poet laureate on our editorial board, didn't win. which I know is disappointing for a lot of people. He'd be an amazing counselor. He'll do other great things. He is doing other great things. But yeah, and then can I also point out that I think it's fair. Some people were in touch with us, and some people that were critical of my comments, my interpretation on Tuesday. Were saying, when certain candidates were talking about the status quo, and we were having some fun with that, and Eric, who wrote into the show to say he was tired of the Edmonton's revolving door of brown immigrant bus driver mayors, which was maybe the line of the month, which was pretty good. Some people wrote in and said, hey, you guys have spent all this time talking about the dynamic, the makeup of these councils, gender, ethnicity, etc. What about political perspectives? What about positions on issues that matter to people? Where's talk about diversity there or status quo there? And let me say, it's a fair point. It's a really fair point. But I think that a lot of times when it comes to elections, it's a great time to talk about composition and makeup and dynamic and representation and what that means. And this is all part of it. When we say we want to hear from you, we mean it. You know where you can find us. Talk at ryanjesperson.com. We've got a great roundtable coming up. It's Friday. That means it's the Real Talk Roundtable in just a second. ADHD in adulthood. We pushed this out yesterday. Hoyles makes the announcement from or maybe a couple of days ago, from our official Twitter account, Real Talk RJ, and automatically people were engaging. Automatically people were saying from across Canada, oh my gosh, so excited about this. They're tagging their friends in it. People are saying, if I would have known, and this includes one of our guests coming up, Keren, in just a second, we're going to talk to her. We're going to get to know Keren Richard. She says, if I would have known this like 20 years ago, my diagnosis would have changed everything. So we'll find out what that means, learn a little bit more about ADHD. It's ADHD Awareness Month, as a matter of fact. October is, right? And so we're happy to certainly learn a little bit more, to seek to understand, as Stephen Covey would say. Before we go there, let me remind you that the team at Westworld Computers is independently owned, which is a great reason to show them your support. Another is that they've been supporting us since day one. They're your Apple experts, and for more than 40 years, they've been providing sales and service, and most recently, of course, not just through the pandemic, not just at their brick and mortar location, but online as well. So if you have your eye on the new MacBook Pro, the new generation of iPad, maybe that new Series 7 Apple Watch, or the iPhone 13, I recommend the Pro, the iPhone 13 Pro. What a phone, the Pro Max. If you're serious about your photos, there's no other phone like it on the market. They've got them in stock now, and you can find them. They'll ship anywhere in Canada via westworld.ca. We also wanted to remind you that our friends at Eden Landscaping have a ton of experience on different projects. So whether you're looking for sort of more of a rustic look in your outdoor space, maybe your dream is a little bit more modern, maybe you're looking for that sort of trapezoid design, or maybe natural beauty, maybe stonework is your thing, or maybe you and your family can't stop thinking about those 3-season rooms that are the rage. Expand your footprint when it comes to living space, time you can spend together in and outdoors. What a great compromise that is. Eden Landscaping's doing them all, and they can do this construction through the winter in many cases. So it's always a great time to look them up at landscapeedmonton.ca. That's Eden Landscaping. Great friends of us here at Real Talk. ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Oftentimes people use it as kind of a throwaway phrase, like, I wonder if it's ADHD, or I've always thought I might have ADHD. I mean, somebody probably that makes those comments. Maybe it's you, but what do we actually understand about it? How does it impact people? What does treatment look like if that's a thing? What does life living with ADHD involve? These are the questions that, of course, advocates would hope that the general public would ask as part of an awareness month. And that's why we're happy to dedicate time to this conversation today as we welcome Dr. Karthikeyan Ganapathy, an ADHD specialist. André Brisson joining us. André was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. He's a podcaster, by the way. And Keren Richard, recently diagnosed with ADHD as well. Welcome, a warm welcome to the three of you. Keren, I have to admit, I'm potentially mortified right out of the gates. A talk show out of Alberta. Is it Keren Richard? And I'm just blazing in, calling you Keren Richard. I want to get this right.
No, it's my husband would always say it's Richard, but his family's out from Quebec. So if you're out east, Richard is,
What do you prefer? Because I see Andre's nodding. Andre's got this beautiful name, André Brisson. I want to make sure that I get it right. What do you prefer, Keren?
Richard, just because then nobody asks me how to spell it.
Okay. There you go. Nailed it. Well, we're excited to have the three of you here. I'd like to encourage you right out of the gate, if you'd like to add to what another one of our panelists is saying, if you want to almost interrupt in a way, or if you want to take issue with something, please feel free to speak up. You don't have to wait for me to address you or tap you on the shoulder. Keren, you're just recently diagnosed with ADHD. How did this come about? Did you always suspect it?
Honestly, no. I worked as a speech pathologist for almost 20 years, worked with a bunch of kids with ADHD, but the sort of stereotypical, really active little boys that you usually meet. It really wasn't until I started having some really close friends and then a really close family member who got a diagnosis about a year ago that I started doing a little bit more digging and research on it, especially how it presents in women. And started seeing a lot of, I'm not going to call them red flags, but a lot of indicators that really started making me think.
André, is this, are you hearing some common themes here? Is this something that you automatically relate to right out of the gates based on your experience?
Yeah, immediately. I was only diagnosed a couple of years ago. And I've been searching, I've done a lot of self-learning, gaining my self-awareness, know what my strengths are, but there's always one thing missing that seemed to disrupt all these strengths. And then I was in the middle of a life tempest, I call it, where I had bad partnerships with entrepreneurial journeys. My kids actually ramped up my unknown symptoms, and it just got to the point where I was not tolerable to be around, so I went and got help. And then that final puzzle piece that connected everything I learned about myself got connected. And that's why I call it my last puzzle piece. I just made clarity and get me to get rid of the character I've been playing for 44 years and then to get the true me out.
Wow.
I feel the exact same way.
Is that right?
Like I've said, I feel like I'm living a lot more congruently with how I want to live. And it feels like I have become the person that's always been in there, but for whatever reason has just been stifled.
Dr. Ganapathy. Oh, pardon me, Keren.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Doctor, I'm not surprised that the podcaster here, that André has a way with words. But how powerful to say this is something that was interrupting his strengths. And now upon his diagnosis, he's able to better understand the character he's been playing for more than 40 years. Can you give us, from your clinical perspective, a lay person's understanding of what we're talking about with ADHD?
Sure. Well, these are stories which we actually kind of hear, on a day-to-day basis, actually in our clinic. They come and they get diagnosed quite later in the life. And it's almost like suddenly they say that, we realize that, once a treatment is done, they feel like as if they are wearing a new set of glasses. The lives are, kind of turned around a bit, actually. They have not recognized this kind of problems, what they had with, the attention, the concentration problems, the problems what they actually had with their executive functioning, a lot of impulsive behaviors, impacting their ability in the decision making. And like what André kind of, acknowledged here, that, he had in some run-in with some entrepreneurs and things like that. And suddenly increased stress comes in, and then they are finding it difficult to juggle all the balls, and they drop everything. They become suddenly so depressed. And usually they go to the doctors, and the family physicians immediately they diagnose them. You're diagnosed with depression. That has been the main focus of these people. Actually, they get it treated for that, and very often they feel like something is missing. I'm got better in my mood, but I'm still not there. I'm still not able to kind of get my job done. I'm still not able to kind of focus things, and they still don't feel right. They start coming to us later, once they realize that, I read it on the internet, my son got diagnosed with ADHD. My friends actually pointed out, you're always scatterbrained, you're not actually kind of focusing here. And then they realize, okay, well, maybe, I need to go and talk to a specialist here. And then that's when they come to a door. So these kind of stories is something we hear every day. It just... The prevalence of ADHD is so much, it actually has a huge impact, it has a huge cost to our nation as well. We probably have around 1.8 million patients of ADHD in Canada, and that is a huge prevalence actually. Considering that we have around 38 million population, and the way it is impacting their life, in terms of the occupation, in terms of the relationship what they have, and the marriages, it is huge.
I got to be honest, maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but this, and I'll acknowledge this is anecdotal, but our live chat right now, we've got an audience that joins us every morning, and a lot of times they'll wear their hearts on their sleeves. I mean, they'll just put it out there, their personal experiences. This is a nonstop stream of people talking right now about ADHD. I mean, Miranda says, I was told I was depressed. I was told that I had learning disabilities. I was told I had a bad attitude, and I talked too much. Stelly says, I've been wondering for years if I'm on the autism spectrum. It's really hard to get a diagnosis. Hannah says, I was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 34. I was so relieved to understand my struggles were not due to me being inadequate or lazy. I mean, I've got three panelists here, so I want to hand things over to you. I could go on for 10 minutes reading these comments. André, it's obviously landing with you, I can tell.
Yeah. Like the one thing for me was I did well in school. I got an engineering degree. I ran successful companies. So for a while, when I was young, if you were smart, you did not have ADHD. There's no way. Yeah. And I still, right now, I still have a discussion with my general practitioner. He still doesn't think it, but the psychiatrist he respects diagnosed me. But it just makes no sense that you're too smart. And like women, they're more an inattentive ADHD, so that it's more internal and not as hyperactive as a lot of the little boys are. So that's also overlooked. And I think that's where a lot of the diagnoses that ever since I've been paying attention to this, is the diagnoses are come from more successful and smart people, which were ignored in the past.
Yeah, Karen, I couldn't agree more with that. Yeah. It's, the first friend that I had diagnosed was a woman, I should say, that I went to university with, getting master's degree. So these aren't slouches. Even in conversations with my own family doctor, she disclosed her son had just gotten a diagnosis, and she's thinking she might have it as well. So and I completely agree with you, André. It's you did well enough in school, so it wasn't a problem. And I was always the kid who talked too much, but my brain was scattered, trying to explain. It's almost like without treatment, it's like whether it's spinning plates or balls juggling in the air, and an inability to just put things in line and think about them in a linear way.
Yes, exactly.
And for me, I mean, treatment has meant that now I can take all of those piles of everything and align them. And I know where to start and where I'm going and how to get there. And I've just unlocked this, extra level of superpowers at this point.
Yeah, I love that analogy. Like for me, my psychiatrist said that I was under the radar for so long because I created my own systems and mechanisms to overcome the symptoms without realizing it, which would make me more normal, to make me look more normal. Yeah. And you know what? And like Dr. Ganapathy mentioned, is like that caused a lot of stress. And I think, Karen, you alluded to this too. It's like, it takes a lot of mental energy to fit in and not to be either the oddball or the outsider. And it takes a toll on you. And then once I got that diagnosis, man, like, it's just like, wow, this is true me. And I've always known it down deep inside. I always knew this is the way I solve problems. This is how I am. There's nothing wrong with me, but everyone keeps telling me something's wrong with me. So I must be wrong. But now it's like, no, that's crap, man. I know who I am. I know there's some symptoms that become problematic in social settings, which doesn't help with my mild Asperger's diagnosis. But knowing that and being aware of that is an eye opener.
Can I ask, and actually I'd love for all three of you to answer this, because you'll answer based on your lived experience, and then of course Dr. Ganapathy based on your medical experience as well. But let me go to you first, Doctor. First of all, is ADHD, does it qualify as a so-called learning disability? In some cases, could it be perceived as or manifest itself as a gift? I mean, how do you sort of understand it? Is it different for every person?
Well, let me, kind of explain based on how we actually as medical professionals look at it. Learning disability or learning disorder actually per se actually is a completely different diagnosis. So there are two different categories here. One, what we call about as intellectual disability. These are people who are obviously their IQ is low and they're not able to function well academically and socially as well. And there are other group of people who have what we call as learning disorders, who actually is like the people with dyslexia. They have reading difficulties, writing difficulties, and their pronunciation is difficult actually. So those are two different disorders we medically we kind of relate to. In ADHD, the interesting thing is the knowledge is not the problem. There's the performance that is a problem. Yeah. And that is a point I think we want to get it out to everybody actually. And also the other important point people have to recognize, it's not really attention deficit disorder. It's actually the nomenclature is not right. It is actually an attention regulation disorder. The problem is in regulating the attention. They can hyper focus on things if they are interested in it. You give an ADHD guy with something to play with. He plays video games for 4 hours, 8 hours. And, you ask them, they watch Netflix for hours. So they are focusing, they are concentrating. The only thing is, there's something motivating them and then suddenly they're able to involve in it. But they're not regulating that, to the extent that they can actually say, okay, I'm going to apply my brakes here. I'm going to move on to another one. Now, this is where I think people sometimes say, hey, I got the gift here with ADHD, because when I have ADHD, I'm able to kind of have the superpowers and I'm able to kind of, focus on it. I'm able to get it done. What they are alluding to is basically that they're able to hyper focus on things and they're able to achieve a lot. It is in some ways, they can do it in spurts, but the problem is at what cost? The problem is they might achieve in one area, the other area, they might actually lose out on the relationships. They might be the absent father who's never been there, but, so those kind of difficulties starts coming in. So they might do a little bit better in the business and which they are probably trying to say, but the problem is, again, they can become consistently inconsistent, they can go well and then suddenly fail and then go well and suddenly fail. So I don't consider this as exactly a huge gift. And the scientific actually evidence is also telling us that ADHD people consistently underperform over a longitudinal, course compared to the other people actually. So there is a bit of a disability there because of this ADHD. And that is where I think, professionals like us are advocating to the government and everybody to recognize this as a problem. Of course, people with ADHD has control over it. So that is where a lot of people come to me and say, hey, can you not, I have ADHD diagnosis. Can you not sign me on benefits and things like that? It's not like, somebody with actually a mental illness who's hearing voices, right? Where they don't actually have, any control over that. Here, people actually have some control over it and a good percent of control over it. And therefore, we say to them, hey, you know what? When this is a problem, of course, if you have depression, if you have anxiety and anything is impacting you very badly, we can easily fill up and support you with those things. But otherwise, if you get the treatment and you will get better. And the good thing about this is, and the so satisfying thing as a professional for me, is that I see awesome responses when I treat these patients. Almost, 8 out of 10 patients of mine, they get through, and the literature supports it as well. We just have to find the right medication, do a little bit of a switch and swap. I do tell my patients it's not a sprint, so don't rush into it. It's a bit of a marathon. And particularly when people with ADHD, when the older age group come in, they come in with multiple layers of other problems. I have a 17-year-old kid who I saw last week, putting him on one medication is already saying, hey, I'm doing really well. I'm actually very happy. Thank you very much. And whereas, when I see a patient with adult ADHD, they come in with, there's already depression there's already family issues going on. They're separating from the marriage. Financially, they're almost going down bankrupt, and there are so many other layers of things that comes in where we are focusing suddenly on, hey, I'm using cannabis, to cope. That is the only thing that gets me through the day, right? And therefore, there's a lot of problem that adds on. So I would like to say that the question, I know I gave a bit of a long-winded answer,
That's
but
okay.
when people say what they are trying to say about ADHD as a gift is that what they're saying is, hey, maybe I can hyper-focus and I have a lot of energy to get things done. And of course, it'll help you to a certain extent, but be cautious. It's not going to be on the long run. Actually, you still have to learn to regulate it. And that's where actually, you might need to be cautious, actually.
I want to integrate some more audience commentary into this. Lisa, I think my question resonated with her a little bit. She says, yes, a gift. She says, my daughter is a research queen. Lisa says, I mentioned a football helmet on Sunday, and I ended up with a 20-minute lesson on the types and technology that they're using, the science that's going into NFL football helmets, says Lisa. Keren, it looks like that's resonating with you.
Yeah, like I said, I worked as an SLP for 20 years and always felt like I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I worked really hard to get there, but it just wasn't enough. So I was constantly searching for something new. And I just always called myself, a lifelong learner. I'm always throwing myself into some other various form of specialty within the field. And about a year ago, I left it entirely. And now I work in startup, which is just feeds everything that my ADHD brain wants. I've got novelty and change, and I'm constantly learning something new. And it's, I can definitely relate to what you were saying, Doctor, about, the fits and starts and the crashes. And it's been certainly a learning curve, and moving away from everything I knew into stripping away all of that structure of a regular workday. That is really when my symptoms blew up in my face. The perception of being lazy or not able to do things. But now, as I'm figuring it out, it's, I have found a way to live a life that's more in line with who I am and how my brain works, which I think is really important.
Keren, you're talking a bit about your work. There should be many perks to appearing on Real Talk, and one of them should be shameless shouts out with regards to what you do. So as mentioned, you have a ton of experience as a speech language pathologist, but you're also a tech entrepreneur. And tell us a little bit about what you're doing with Made Live. This is like you allow people, you created software so people can self-publish children's books. How cool is that?
Exactly. It's very cool. I've been obsessed with kids' books, my entire career. Always used them in therapy with the kids that I worked with, and had initially walked away from my job hoping to write children's fiction, and then stumbled into the fact that there's no real great way of doing it.
Yeah.
Outside of traditional publishing. So there's software for novelists. There's really great things, but once you start integrating those images, it becomes really, really tricky if you aren't super adept at Adobe Illustrator.
Yeah.
So my husband is my tech co-founder, and I got built-in software development. So he and I have built some software. Yeah, exactly. We're heading into some beta testing right away. So we're hoping to launch in early 2022. I think
it's caught my attention because I've got one friend in particular. He's certain that he's going to wind up writing a kid's book, and I feel like I think he has the ability. I know he has the ability. And so it caught my attention what you're doing. Okay, now shameless plug for André. Let's point out that his podcast is called The Impulsive Thinker, a podcast for the high-achieving ADHD entrepreneur with André Brisson. I absolutely love your logo, André. It's amazing.
Thank you.
What's been the response? I mean, like I said, I'm wowed. I'm not surprised, but I'm impressed by the magnitude of commentary and the significance of it that we're seeing from our live audience. What's your audience response? I mean, you've got a podcast specifically about this. You must have this kind of nation of this community of people that gather to talk about not just the challenges, but maybe some of the joys as well.
Yeah, that's the one thing that a lot of the high achieving or high performing entrepreneurs that are often missed being diagnosed is that we've got a lot of success. We've got a lot of accomplishments, but we don't see that. We don't acknowledge that. It's like, for me, it's the task is done, on to the next. I got to keep going or I get depressed. And with that is we forgot to go to school to be happy. So having that thought is talking with a lot of other entrepreneurs is I've created a lot of shortcuts and mechanisms to overcome my symptoms, and I refined them after I got diagnosed. So I got shortcuts to overcome my executive functioning deficits. And the one thing I really did was, I was diagnosed diabetes type 2 first, and I'm glad I got diagnosed that first before my ADHD, because I learned how to manage diabetes. It's like, you know what? I have it. There's nothing I can do about it. It's there for life, but I can control it. So I control the diabetes. I lost 70 pounds. I got, really good numbers, so it's not damaging me. And then when I got diagnosed to ADHD, I looked at that and said, I can manage it. It's not much I can do. But I've always about finding personal strengths, identifying people's strengths. But if you don't use your strengths properly, they can become your weaknesses. So I melt that with when my symptoms took over my life, now that became a weakness, that became a disorder. So now I just flipped the switch. I said, now if I manage these symptoms, quote unquote, I've turned them into my strengths, where I can able to harness my ADHD abilities and strengths. Like for me, hyperfocus, impulsivity, believe it or not, once it's managed, it's good for problem solving. I'm really good at solving problems that other people give up on and find solutions where people can't see it or they gave up on. So that, and that is like, a lot of people are wondering, a lot of people were learning from me. So I decided to throw it as a podcast, and I'm talking to a lot of bright ADHD entrepreneurs. And the spin I'm taking on it, and what I don't hear from other ADHD podcasts, is I'm celebrating successful ADHD entrepreneurs, but also they're communicating, they're still having challenges, and this is how they overcame it.
I love it.
I thought that was an important one.
I suspect you're going to see a bit of an uptick in subscribers today, which is awesome. Again, Andre's podcast,
I appreciate it.
The Impulsive Thinker. Back to the live chat. Some random guy says, maybe I actually have a textbook case of ADHD and I just never knew about it. Doctor, what should people?
Right.
Does that sound? I mean, that sounds like it's both of your testimonies, Keren and yourself, André. Doctor, what should people be looking out for? I mean, how is misdiagnosis kind of a common thing? Let me just swerve off as I do for a moment, and maybe this is my old school thinking. I don't know, and maybe all three of you will wince and cringe as I say this, or maybe you're hoping it comes up so you can address it. But we've all heard it, right? We've all heard the people that think it's kind of fake, or not real, or exaggerated. Schools, these teachers, these doctors, they just want to throw Ritalin at everybody. Everybody's got ADHD. When I was young, my teacher cracked the whip and we'd all just pay attention. Like, I acknowledge it sounds like, 85 years ago when they were still strapping kids with birch whip, but Doc, I mean, what's the deal when it comes to the science behind the diagnosis, what we know about it, et cetera?
Well, basically, ADHD is actually the most common, psychiatric disorder, it's the science basically kind of validates the diagnosis, far better, than any other kind of, problems, I would say. It has been conclusively proved that actually, people with ADHD's brain are very different, actually. And there are problems in the frontal lobe, and different parts of the brain. It's been clearly proved beyond doubt, actually, on that. It's unfortunate is that people still don't actually have this concept actually very clearly that got in. Now, what we do know is, and particularly where the professionals have actually failed a little bit, is the science has been advancing to prove that actually ADHD carries on even after the adolescence, and that is where actually even, professionals like us, when we were initially trained as psychiatrists, we were told that ADHD actually is a childhood psychiatric disorder, and people basically grow out of it by the age of 18. But what we really know is that that's not the case. 60% of the people who actually have ADHD as a child continue to have impairment. But if you look at the diagnostic, they probably 80% will still have the symptoms. But only when you have impairment, we call it as a disorder. Now, if you're attention deficit, if you are not able to regulate it well, and if you're having executive functioning problems, you have a nice secretary to look after all those things, and you're coping okay, then that's fine. We are very happy for you, right? You don't need to come in and get those things done and do that. The problem is that when these kids actually become older and they grow, they have problems in regulating their attention. So the typical story goes on is that, these are the young kids, who either get diagnosed or or underdiagnosed when they're young, And then when they actually, grow, when they go to the grade 7, there's a little bit more stress around, a little bit more homework. But really, it hits them only when they go to university. They suddenly notice they have to work doubly hard than their own colleagues who are probably not working as hard. And they're noticing like, hey, why am I actually have to spend more time? I'm not actually spending, having as much fun. They cope, have multiple relationships, impulsive decision making, young kids, early pregnancies. These are some of the things that happens. But as an adult, they start having problems. They start, binge eating, overeating is common, which later leads on to kind of, having problems with obesity. And that leads to diabetes, and then goes on with sleep apnea problems. And then they come to us quite late, actually, saying, hey, I have all these problems. I'm depressed. None of the medications are working for me, right? And you can see this consistent course happening. And the science has clearly proved this, that this is the natural course of this disease. If only we have diagnosed this person earlier and treated them with the appropriate medication, they would have had far less life events. The impulsive decision making would have been a lot more less. The financial management would have been far better. The careers might be a lot more, easier for them. They probably would have not blurted out so many things and made some impulsive, angry outburst comments, and they probably would have not lost relationships. Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, by the time they come to us, they develop so much problems, including, physical health issues like diabetes, obesity, and sleep apnea. They develop mental health issues. And one of the common things I see in these people is actually they come in with depression. They've tried, I tried Prozac, I've tried this. The GP says nothing is working for me. And then they refer to them actually. And we actually have to then, we explain to them the problem is actually in the dopamine and the norepinephrine. So going back to the science, it's clearly actually shows that there is the dysregulation here. There's a problem in regulating these neurotransmitters. And basically, the maturation of the brain is the problem. It's not just the nerve cells are not as matured enough as appropriate to that particular age, actually. And some of them continue to have difficulties the whole lifespan. And this has been, science has conclusively proved this as well. So this diagnosis is a very valid diagnosis, and there is no doubt about it. And I can tell you, majority of the people who look on the internet and came to me saying that, hey, I actually had the symptoms. What do you think? I would say 9 out of 10 people are absolutely spot on. There is an occasional, person who probably might be looking for a stimulant, actually. But I would say 95% of the people, they're fine. They're actually quite right. It's been underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed at many places, actually. And unfortunately, they don't get the right treatment behind that. I would like to add one important point to this as well. Very often, ADHD is looked upon as attention regulation problems or executive functioning, hyperactivity, impulsivity. But one of the other important problems they have is actually mood regulation. Oh, yeah. So the attention goes up and down. The mood, the hyperactivity is up and down, but the mood is also up and down. And unfortunately, because of their emotional dysregulation, they get into, a lot of relationship difficulties, both at the personal level with their own partners or at the, workplace. They just shout back and they get angry, actually. Mm-hmm. And of course, this leads them to be fired. I very often say to my clients, hey, you forget some things, you're running late, you apologize, your boss is okay, your wife is okay. But if you start getting angry and you start becoming, defensive and you start shouting back, they're not going to like it, and therefore get your mood under control. Get your emotion under control. Yeah.
I can tell, Doctor, that what you're saying about mood regulation resonated with André and Keren. I want to hand the mic to them here, but I want to provide some context with regards to where the audience is at. I mean, Hope shares with us. She said, I had lost hope, in fact. She says, as I kept losing jobs after working 20 years in the same industry, I couldn't catch on to new systems. I felt like I was operating in a fog, says Hope. And then unfortunately says, I got medicated, I landed a job, and then the pandemic hit. It's been a tough stretch for her. But this is a really interesting question, too, from Rach. Rach is listening in, says, and wonders aloud to the audience, and let me put it even to our panelists here. How many of you have disclosed your diagnosis to your employer? Are there any success stories? Rach says, I'm nervous to ask for accommodations. André, what would you tell her?
That I can't answer because I'm unemployable. That's why I started in an engineering company and started an ADHD high-performing entrepreneur coaching company. That's a tough one. For me, I've never been ashamed of what I do or whatnot. So when I got the ADHD diagnosis, it's out there with everyone. Like the emotional dysregulation, like the doctor was talking about, that's huge. Now you put in the fact that you got an impulsivity inhibition. My prefrontal cortex, which is the filter, I've always been accused of never having a filter, which is actually true. My prefrontal cortex is not filtering my impulsive thoughts. They come out. And then now throw in the emotion. Like the way it's explained to me is that people with ADHD, their emotions are felt intensely, like 1,000 times more than a typical person. So I get it. It's like my primitive brain. It's a fight, flight, or react. I get attacked. Like someone just putting a file on my desk, that seems to be an attack. And I'll immediately go, what are you doing? But if I was able to stop thinking, oh, wait a minute, it's not bad, it's just a file. No, it's already out there. The impulsivity comes out. The prefrontal cortex is not filtering that reaction. So it comes out. And it does damage. I've lost a lot of staff. I've lost a lot of clients because of the emotional dysregulation, which is not really talked about in the DSM. But fortunately, my psychiatrist was well educated on that, and we've had a lot of chats about that. And it's a mood thing, how to regulate that mood. It's a tough one if you're working somewhere because it all depends if people are going to believe it or not, or believe in ADHD. I still have people that says ADHD doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not like even. I said I haven't had a job since 2007, so. I can't answer that.
And André, first of all, I just love. Can I just say this roundtable is like, this is how roundtables are supposed to go. So first of all, the three of you are just nailing it right now, and your message is really resonating with people. I mean, we've got Steph is watching right now. She says he is exactly describing me. Exactly describing me. Keren, what are you hearing from André or from Dr. Ganapathy that's resonant? I saw when he talked about behavior or mood regulation, it seemed you kind of, your face lit up a little bit there.
Yeah, it's something that I'm currently exploring with my own family doctor. So obviously speaking from my own personal experience, diagnosis as a woman with ADHD, we have a lot of hormonal shifts week to week and day to day. So we get that the mood shifting as well, but I'm starting to find that there are just certain times where the meds that worked great 2 weeks ago are not working great. And I'm back, I'm back in the fog. And so we're trying to figure out, do we need to have a way to have a higher dose during certain times of the month, quite frankly. So that's been a little bit more of a challenge. I did have an expectation that I would try my meds and a couple other, ways to hack my life. And that would be that. And I'd be good. And that's not, it's not as smooth of a process as I expected, but with good medical support, I'm confident we're going to figure out what works. So it's a challenge. It's I wish they were all great days. When they're great days, they're like a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But then I'll get a 3 or a string of 3s, and they're not so great. So to the point of, whether or not to disclose this to an employer, I mean, obviously that's personal choice. It would be pretty discriminatory if it wasn't taken seriously or if it was downplayed. I personally left my work about a year ago, but had previously been diagnosed with anxiety and had shared that there. And that was received well. So, it really just depends on the support that you've got in supervisors and those that you work alongside. But I also am an open book. I want people to know what they're dealing with and who they're dealing with. So I've been sharing my journey while I've been doing this entrepreneurship thing. I've been doing an accelerator program out of Kelowna, and have shared this whole journey with the boards as I sit in on quarterly meetings. And that's been incredible feedback. The number of female entrepreneurs and other people who are going, man, that sounds like me. And, just being able to be open and sharing, it doesn't feel like that is standing in my way. It feels like it's opening up more connections and more understanding for people. And, in light of it being ADHD Awareness Month, I think we need to talk about it. So if you're comfortable, talk about it.
Well,
share your experience.
I mean, I'll tell
we
you,
need people like you, Karen, out there, and I appreciate your story.
Well, and
for
you,
sure.
André, I mean, your podcast is great. Let me just say, as a testament to you three and to my audience, to our audience, I mean, I'm just blown away right now. The more we talk, the longer the list of questions gets, which I think means that we're accomplishing what we're trying to accomplish. But André, back to you.
The one thing I would add to that, disclosing it to your employer, there are ways, rather than just saying I'm ADHD, figure out what your symptom or your challenge is, and then approach it to your supervisor with the challenge you're having with a solution. If I can have, show up 2 hours later and work 2 hours later, I can get more productivity out, for example. But if you come up with a solution and then you can promise some positive results, they can try it. You're most likely going to have the opportunity to have that experiment to be tried, but not just come up say I have ADHD and have for you to figure it out.
Yeah. Doctor, sorry, André, I didn't mean to step on your toes there, but doctor, let me ask you, there's an interesting, and you can pick up on that to be sure, but the audience is really quite interested right now to learn more about how do I want to fight? I guess essentially how gender or, how hormones or how our genetic makeup, who we are inherently can impact ADHD, the diagnosis, or how it manifests itself. This has really resonated with this audience. If you could pick up with that and run with it.
Yes. Hopefully, Ryan, you can hear me well. I've got a little bit of disturbance in the connection there.
We can hear you, Doc. You bet.
Well, awesome. Okay. Well, basically, women with ADHD, interestingly, are not diagnosed as much as men are, particularly in the young age. So if you look at the studies, the children actually, at least 3 boys are diagnosed, but only 1 girl is actually diagnosed as a child. And does it mean to say that actually less women are there? I mean, it's really, interesting, because when you look at the adult age group, it almost kind of narrows down, and there is actually a lot more people who are now, and diagnosed with 1-to-1. So I think, he's certainly picking up on it. And, why don't women get diagnosed as a child? Well, no, the reason, because they're quiet. They're just not punching people. So, they're just sitting down and doing. And
Doc, we're just losing your signal for we're experiencing just a mild interruption.
Actually. So if you're a kid sitting in the corner who's quite intelligent enough to kind of really grasp the subject.
Doctor, sorry, we're just getting a bit of an interruption with your signal there, but we heard the majority of what you said. Karen, it kind of reminded me, as a matter of fact, of one of your tweets that caught our attention. And I wanted to reference this. You tweeted on October the 8th. You said, I was diagnosed with ADHD about a month ago. I'm 40. You say, I'm upset, thinking what I could have accomplished if it would have happened in my 20s. Bring on the new ADHD me. What does that mean exactly? What kind of a difference do you think it might have made in your 20s or your 30s?
I had said earlier, I felt like I have spent time in a career where, I did like what I did, but it never really felt like that was it. I always felt a little limited. I job hopped a lot. I consider myself fortunate. I didn't ever get fired, but I got itchy feet and I left. And, I used to live in Edmonton, worked there for years. Great job, great employer, but I got bored. So I was off to Calgary, and then, I hopped around quite a lot. So my impulsive decision-making has been around career things. I'm, the new ADHD me is I understand myself. I understand what I'm interested in. And I have a new level of confidence of being able to pursue the things that resonate with me and that matter. I strongly believe prior to considering this, I didn't have the guts to leave my career. I was so committed and loyal to it. And it had taken me so long to get there and so much work to get there. I didn't want to leave. But now, living much more congruently with who I want to be and who I really feel I am, which also means open and honest and forthcoming about my strengths and my challenges, and if I'm having a good day or a bad day, and all of that, everything that comes with it.
I love that, but I love that you include strengths. You saying to be honest and forthright about my strengths and my challenges, and I think that's such a great way to look at it. I want to note that I want to respect all of your time, and we're hitting kind of the 40-minute mark here, but I still have a ton of questions. Let me say, let me give you this as what one of my friends would call the close watch. So we're not wrapping immediately, but we will soon we shall wrap. And so if there's anything you want to keep putting out there, but I want to talk about treatment before we go. And obviously, doctor, we'll be interested in your perspective on it from a physician's perspective, of course, an expert perspective, but the lived experience works too. And we've got a whole bunch of people talking about what's worked for them. I mean, Chris just joined our conversation. He says, I came in late. Has anybody talked yet about cognitive behavioral therapy? He says, I'm wondering if it could be effective for ADHD in conjunction with meds. André, you talked about your treatment. Doctor, you talked about cannabis. I want to follow up on that. But André, let's go with you first. Treatment-wise, we'll acknowledge that the same game plan doesn't work for everybody. But what's worked for you?
I'm still 2.5 years in. We're still trying to figure out the medication. I have taken CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, and it wasn't directed to ADHD primarily, but I benefited from it. It's about catching your negative thoughts, catching it, checking it, and releasing it. And I'm also signed up for DBT, the dialectical behavioral therapy, which is very promising. It to me, the way I understand it is we see the life as black and white, and DBT will help us work with the gray or take a look at the black and say that there is a white side to it. And I'll help with a lot of the personal interrelations, intolerance, frustration, intolerance, which, I do, impatience. But a lot of it is, I learned a lot about the ADHD. I learned how the ADHD brain functions and works and how that correlated with my symptoms and my challenges. But it's constant, I see my psychiatrist every 4 or 5 months. We have a conversation and we tweak stuff as we go. And a good resource, if I don't mind plugging, is CADAC, the Center of ADHD Awareness Canada, CADDAC.ca. People across the world go to the CADAC website for resources. So there's a lot of information there. And it's a charity, Canadian charity for ADHD, started over 20 years ago by Heidi Bernhardt, who had a family of ADHD, and she's non-ADHD, but at the time there's no information out there. So she created it.
Doctor, let me go to you next. With regards to therapy, to treatment, obviously I would imagine there are a ton of different approaches to it. So what should people consider?
Well, basic thing first they got to do is, see a specialist and make sure that they actually get the diagnosis. When they see as adults, it's important they see a specialist for no other reason. They need to, of course, identify the ADHD, which I believe is usually straightforward. But you also have to identify the other underlying layers which comes along with it, which I talked earlier. And you will need help with that as well. The second thing is get yourself as much educated about this adult ADHD, because there are a lot of misconceptions about it. And I liked, what André pointed out, CADAC is a great website. CADRAC, Canadian ADHD Resource Alliance, that's the one which is another organization which actually guides all the professionals. In Canada, it's one of the leading organizations. And it puts out about the medications, how we go about it and everything. There is some resources there as well. And you can actually look at these kind of really validated websites, actually, which will give you a very good information. And then I would say medications is still the very first line treatment. ADHD is really a problem, which is, I would say, is highly genetic. There are problems in your brain. And you have to acknowledge that and try to make sure that you actually take some medications actually to help you. I would say that some people might, stimulants are the first line of treatment. I mean, whatever I'm saying, I'm just going to say it broadly. It's not a medical advice. You still have to see the doctor to talk about it. And the next thing is, obviously there are non-stimulant options as well. People come to me, they ask me, well, can I not go on medications? Can I do other things? Of course, you can try other things. Certainly, you can actually try, educating yourself as much as possible with your ADHD. Do the CBT for ADHD. And, I loved what André said now. He got a CBT for depression, actually. That is what all about, identifying the negative thoughts and everything. But what you need is CBT for your ADHD, which is a completely different ballgame. And the unfortunate part about it is the number of specialists who do that is actually quite low. And that's where the difficulty comes in, actually. So, you might have to go to a trained psychologist or the therapist or in this field. There are some ADHD coaches who do some awesome work, and they are actually able to help with people, with their executive functioning deficits. They give them guidelines on what else to do, identify each problem, what they have, and they give them some practical strategies. And, and that's where it ties in with the third thing you talked about, about the accommodation. The doctors might be able to give you a letter which basically says that, hey, you have these difficulties. Maybe you might actually need some help here, right? And those are things which can be tailored actually in your exam situations and other things as well. So you need to get help for that as well. And once you get all those things, I would say after doing these things, try avoiding things which is actually not helpful for your ADHD. And that's where I think, Ryan, you were mentioning about this cannabis. And, I would like to talk about it. I always, have a bit of a lecture to my clients. Sometimes they don't like it. I politely say to them, okay, I'll just send you some information by email and you can have a look at it and you think about it. Cannabis is great in terms of helping people actually on the short run. On the long run, though, it's unfortunately actually has some problems. And CBD is not a huge issue from my point of view, but I think THC is a problem. Anyway, CBD is a bit of a gateway and people end up going on THC. And evidence has been saying that if you're going to do it consistently every day, it affects your functioning, affects the attention and cognition actually, and it's not helpful. But the problem is it goes down. They actually find it very, very helpful. And therefore they take it. And I don't blame them. If the medical professionals, if they're family doctors, if they can't help with their problems, what are they going to do? They're going to try something actually that is easily accessible. And there is a friend who's somebody saying to them, hey, try this. You will actually feel a lot better. And therefore people are going to try it and they are going to come in here. What I think, that's where the specialists will be able to really help people to say, I have these kind of problems, use this opportunity to educate people, is that a lot of people with ADHD actually has, racing thoughts going in their head, and they all have what we call as a delayed sleep phase syndrome. Not everybody, quite a few of them actually. And what it means is that these people tend to go bed at least.
Doc, we're kind of losing your signal, unfortunately, but I think we got the gist of basically what you're saying, and I appreciate the nuance there, and it is important, I think, to have responsible conversations around cannabis and to point out that it's not for everybody, and in some cases, it certainly can be detrimental, just like anything else, and I appreciate that. Keren, is it too soon for us to ask you? You're about what, 6 weeks, 7 weeks into this diagnosis? Is it too soon to ask you about what's working and what's not?
No. I don't have the answers. I don't think this journey is done. As André said, he's a couple of years into figuring out, treatments and what's working. I did CBT before for anxiety. That certainly helped. But I think the key thing that jumped out at me when my other panelists here were chatting was know yourself, learn more, educate yourself. It really wasn't until I started finding, and for me, female specific, adult women, women with ADHD specifically. I had found a great podcast called ADHD for Smartass Women. That one was eye-opening. Yeah, it's a great one. And a YouTube channel called How to ADHD. Mm-hmm. And again, it's, they have the experts on, they talk about why am I not motivated? What's wrong with me? It's really trying to help you understand yourself. And then when you understand yourself, you're better able to go and advocate for yourself with your doctor, with your employer, with whoever. But, if you don't understand yourself, how do you solve that challenge? How do you overcome that problem? So that's been really key for me. Meds are working great for me. I've got a great partner who will call me out in a very gentle way of letting me know, like, hey, are your meds working great today?
Dangerous question.
We have a very a good conversational and we just have a great way of sort of talking about our mental health in our house. I think that's really important, but just surrounding yourself with people who do believe you, because it's not fake. It's not all in your head. I mean, it's neurological, but it's real, and it has a real impact, and so has treatment. I mean, I feel like me for the first time, and I'm 40. Like to
awesome.
Say it's life-changing is an understatement.
The environment has a big impact too. So like what Keren explained, she's in a positive environment that's supportive. That really helps with your symptoms.
Absolutely.
When I changed my environment at my office that supported my symptoms, it changed. So like the other thing too is what I've learned from other ADHD people and the experts have been living to is we can never solve our ADHD and be 100% perfect and cured. We're going to have good days and bad days as long as we live, but actually just trying and put in the effort is what's matters. So to get the diagnosis was good, but to also realize and understand that you won't fix it. You will never be able to fix it, helps you with managing it from day to day. And the environment is key. Like that's what I did. I fired a bunch of people around me, customers, bad staff, the negative. And then I'm surrounding myself with equal, like-minded individuals, entrepreneurs. And then all of a sudden I've discovered a support structure I've never had in my life. I was always looking for the wrong crowd.
I hope that if the three of you find some time in your day after giving us an hour, thank you, that you go back and you actually, if you watch this on YouTube, you'll be able to read the comments in real time. And I encourage you, if you have a chance to go back, you'll see it speaks for itself. The impact that the three of you have had on our audience today. Adrian says many thanks to these guests. It says, as an advocate and as a support person, there is so much to learn, and talking about this helps so much. Others are just saying they're grateful that we can have this conversation. I mean, Kimberly says she's crying happy tears. Others are saying, I'm just grateful that we can have this conversation, Steph says, and that we can discuss it openly. Steph says, by the way, Dr. Ganapathy is amazing. Can we please have his contact information? Yes, you sure can. You can check out envisionmindcare.com if you'd like to learn more about what the good doctor is doing. That's envisionmindcare.com. And of course, we want to mention Andre's podcast again, The Impulsive Thinker, a podcast for the high-achieving ADHD entrepreneur. That's hosted by our guest, André Brisson. Karen Richard has joined us, and of course, Dr. Karthikeyan Ganapathy. To the three of you, we wanted to do something meaningful and real and legit and informative when it came to ADHD Awareness Month, and with the assistance, the great help of course, the producer of this show, Sarah Hoyles. The three of you have delivered. Thank you sincerely.
Thank you.
Thanks for this opportunity.
You bet.
We do appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Wow. Look at this smile. Can we take Sarah's? Now you're going to wipe it off. Now you're just going back to that was a satisfied smile. That was a great round table. That was really good.
That was one where Hoyles tried to wipe the smile off and just couldn't.
But you know what? I wish people could see. We almost need to have like a Hoyles and Brooks cam. We need to kind of have cameras on you guys through the whole interviews because Sam is so animated, and you and I feel, because you feel deeply. Can I say that? You feel very deeply, and I can tell. And so when people are talking, I mean, the joys, and you're like, oh, but then some people say something, including on our live chat, about the sorrow that they feel. And people are talking about getting years back or wishing they could rewind the clock and ask their doctor or get that diagnosis. And for a lot of people, I think, this is a real, I mean, this is the most obvious thing I'm going to say, but like, what a journey for people, including Karen. I mean, you can see it on her face. She's 6 months or 6 weeks removed from a diagnosis. That was great.
I just feel so privileged to for us to be entrusted with folks' stories, and that just, to always have that feeling like I know something's up. I know something is up, but I'm not a medical expert. So how can I communicate that? I don't have the words for it.
And it's good to have, you got to have the doctor. You need the doctor.
You have to have the doctor.
But you can't just also have the high level, like the medical professionals, the intellectuals. You also need to have the people that are like, here's what it's like in life. Let me tell you about this. André, obviously a very skilled storyteller. And Karen's just like, Karen is the type of person, I think she just walks into the room and the energy just goes when she walks in. You know what I mean? We've got Trash Talk coming up in just a moment. And we've got an email here. Mark took the time to send us an email. He pulled a veteran move on the live chat. He let us know on the live chat. He sent us an email. So we've got it in front of me. But I'm not going to read it for Trash Talk, as a matter of fact. I want to just read it. I just want to read it normally. Number one, because it's a little bit longer, and I don't know if I can sustain. I'm going to blow out my voice on this Friday afternoon, and I've got to do some yelling from behind the bench at hockey this weekend, coaching the little guys. What I mean is, like, I got to do some encouraging, is what I mean. There's no yelling in Timbits, they tell me. But first, I want to let you know that the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, you know the deal. You're a real talker. You know the deal. At the Dairy Queens in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road, they've got 2 cheeseburgers for $5, or the Jespo recommendation, the 2 double cheeseburgers for $7. But please do mark your calendars for 6 days from now. For next Thursday, it's Miracle Treat Day. And that means that these 5 Dairy Queens are going to take every single cent that they collect on Blizzards, not the profits, every cent they collect, and they're going to donate it to the Stollery Children's Hospital Foundation. You really want to make somebody's day? Maybe you've got a staff, maybe you've got, I don't know. Can you drop off? You probably can't drop off Blizzards at a schoolyard. That would probably be a total disaster. I'm the guy. I'm just learning. Our little guy's in grade. I'm just learning. Like, I'm the parent that would send the kid to school with a peanut butter sandwich, and then they'd have the school on lockdown as everybody, puts on the gas masks because some idiot sent peanut butter to the school. So maybe schools is a bad example, but if you can think of a group of folks that would really, really have their day made with a Blizzard, if you order in advance, they'll deliver for free orders that are big enough. You just got to contact them at their 5 locations, the ones we mention every time. A big shout out to our friends at Dairy Queen. Hey, Friesen Brothers, there's a big deal going on this Saturday, October 23rd from 4 to 8 p.m. at select locations in Stony Plain, Fort Saskatchewan, Drumheller, Hinton Hill, Peace River, and that beautiful Rabbit Hill store in South Edmonton. Oktoberfest is back. It means you can feast right in store. They've got a special edition Friesen Brothers feast lined up, and that's saying something. Their team of Red Seal chefs are ready to go. Super excited about this. You can sign up, get more details at friesen.com. I've been telling you for a while, you got to follow Kubi Energy on Instagram. They've got a great Instagram. Check this out. They just posted this, and I love it. Another solution. Look at this. They say, check out this farm with its new energy generation. Check out, they say this is so very cool. Check out Kubi Energy, their website, to see how your farm can get more, I don't know, not just off the grid, not just closer to net zero, but there's actually financial incentives for agricultural producers. That's right. You can get money back. I mean, even more reason to go check out kubienergy.ca. Their team of experts can help you maximize availability of funds. I love it when they end right when the music ends. Maximize availability of funds. Who the hell says stuff like that? Nobody talks like that. They can help you get more money in your pocket is what they're going to do at kubienergy.ca.
More bang for your buck.
More bang for your buck at kubienergy.ca. We should keep a long list of failed promotional slogans that we'd like to offer up our advertising partners. In this month's edition of Bad Idea Slogans.
That would be great. Let's do it. Add it to the whiteboard.
So the Allan Inquiry's out, and it's $3.5 million, Much Ado About Nothing. Mark Doran's been on the show before. You know Mark, he's a loud advocate. I mean that as a compliment. When it comes to Alberta's orphan wells, when it comes to corporate responsibility, Mark cares very deeply about the environment and about his province, his home province of Alberta, and he's just sent this in to us. He says it's for Trash Talk, but I just want to read it. Mark says, I was grateful for the opportunity last February to appear on Real Talk with Reagan Boychuk to talk about orphan and inactive wells. And he says, I've listened to Trash Talk every Friday. I love when Jespo reads them out, but nothing said to date on Trash Talk has measured up to the absolute trash spoken by Alberta's Energy Minister, Sonia Savage, in her press conference yesterday. Sonia says, we're entitled to be mad. Mark says, I'm an administrative law wonk. Steve Allen, that's an underused word. People, policy wonk. Wonk, what a good word. He says, Steve Allen was appointed as a commissioner under the Public Inquiries Act to make inquiries. He had an administrative law mandate to inquire into foreign-funded anti-Alberta oil activities. The commissioner was bound by the provisions of Section 13 of the Public Inquiries Act, which requires that those who are accused of misconduct are entitled to a hearing, to call witnesses, to question their accusers, and the like. I mean, simply put, the commissioner is bound by the rules of natural justice. There were no witnesses in this inquiry. Indeed, no person or group that may have engaged in misconduct was afforded the opportunity to examine witnesses called by any accusers. Commissioner Allan was crystal clear, says Mark. The reasons that there were no oral hearing are just as clear. There was no misconduct, says Mark. He says, I'm mad. He says, what the hell is the energy minister doing, misleading the world yesterday about the results of an inquiry that found nothing? He says, now here's what really makes me mad. What makes me furious, in fact, this inquisition is an obvious attack on the right to free speech that we all possess. But Albertans have not widely denounced this unjust and despicable inquisition. This is our provincial government saying, through Sonia Savage, who's a lawyer no less, that those who don't toe the line will be singled out, subjected to an inquisition, subject to attack by their own government. As stated by the minister, this was done to fulfill an election promise, but this was never acceptable for any reason whatsoever. Mark says one can only hope that one or more of the groups that were the subject of this Allan Inquisition seeks judicial review of the process and the resulting report. Mark says, I'm usually nonpartisan, but Sonia's press conference made me mad. And he says, it strikes me that the minister is way off course. The trash that needs to be taken out this Friday is comprised of the lawless Premier of Alberta and his band of lawless ministers. The stench of deep rot coming off this misguided inquisition and this misguided government that ordered it is simply overpowering. That from Mark. Now, he didn't get the trash talk music, but Sam, if you can give me camera 4, I'll give him the trash talk treatment and say, Mark, thank you for your email. You can be in touch anytime to talk at ryanjesperson.com. Almost gave you a paper cut on the forehead there, Hoyles.
I got one here.
I don't think I could do that again if I tried.
It's right here. I'm gonna the HR. I'm calling HR.
I was gonna say it's a good thing we're a big real life corporation that actually pays for WBC. So now WCB. So now you can
making up acronyms now.
You can file. Yeah, we have WBC. It's a little cheaper than WCB. And you're not going to like the application process. Very few applications are actually processed in the way that you'd like. But I apologize for that. You better get your face shield ready because Trash Talk's coming. It's a lively one. Sarah Hoyle's about to make her Trash Talk debut. Before we do, I want to remind you that our question of the week is up right now for your participation, if you wouldn't mind. You go to ryanjesperson.com, you click on question of the week right at the top of the page, and there you'll find it. Alberta's second election 2 months officially in the rearview mirror. This past Monday, municipal elections took place. Big changes at the top, and some of Alberta's largest cities, the stakes were high. And this week, we're asking you to reflect on the outcome of these elections, the surprises, and what you think the future holds. This is presented in partnership with our research and strategy partners at Y Station, coming up next week on Monday, most likely. First of all, our Patreon supporters will receive the top line report. I'm expecting there to be some incredible fill-in-the-blank comments on this one. And, of course, then we'll go through the results and get a sense of where Real Talkers are at with regards to this election. Mark, talk to us about the trash that needs to be taken out. This is just like such a shameless segue, but it's just an obvious one. The team at Local Waste for 25 years has been taking out the trash and recycling for corporations. I just can't help myself sometimes. Industrial applications and, of course, residential ones too. No matter the size of the bin you're looking for, no matter how long you need it, Local Waste has a solution custom fit to ensure that you feel good about your partnership with them. They're big on integrity. It's a corporate value. It's literally the word framed up on the wall at Local Waste HQ. You can give them a call in Edmonton at 780-809-5013 or in Regina at 306-992-2259. And of course, you can find them online at localwaste.ca. each and every Friday as we wrap up our broadcast week, Hoyles looks like you look like Evander Holyfield, ready to walk out. You look like I need to get you a big robe. You can just roll in, kind of shaking your hands, ready to throw bombs. Hoyles is going to make her debut in just a second. The team at Local Waste every Friday giving us an opportunity, an excuse, if you will, a platform to blow off some steam. It's a little something we like to call Trash Talk. This from Dylan, who wonders who the hell puts something gross on the bottom of a garbage bin without bagging it. Do you want a rancid bun with putrid slime, the stench you can smell across the yard? Because this is how you achieve that. Bag that crap before it goes in the bin. A rotten, flaccid pumpkin with no bag on the bottom 6 days away from garbage day? Really? Dylan says, thank you, Ryan, for letting me yell at you so I don't yell at somebody else. That from Dylan. Hoyles, over to you.
Picture this. I'm hiking up the Beehive Mountain overlooking Lake Louise. The larch are larching. The air is cool and crisp. The skies are picture-perfect blue. Then, a drone! What place does that thing have in the wild? Oh, wait! It doesn't have one. We head to the great outdoors to get away, to disconnect, to put down the smartphone. So leave the drone at home. Your Instagram account will survive without that drone overhead wide shot. Plus, that wrecks it for everyone out here. So leave the drone at home or stay home yourself.
Hoyles nailing it in her Trash Talk debut. I love it. The paper throw and everything. Atta girl, very well done, my teammate. This one from Robert, who says, we've got 2 young daughters, aged 8 and 11. I'm constantly asked, when are you going to try for a boy? I swear, if the next person that asks me this is going to see me lose it. Like, why would I do that? They say to keep the name going. He says, I'm not an emperor. I'm not a king. Nobody cares about my last name. How about I raise my daughters to have the courage to choose whatever name they'd like to move forward with? I mean, maybe they'll be blessed to find a partner with an easier to pronounce name that they might like better. It's not like I picked my name anyway. Guess what? It was given to me. He says, you want to talk about gender equality, says Robert? He says, let's start in the womb. My daughters are not worth less than a boy, and a boy is not worth more than a girl. That's absolutely ridiculous. And then Robert, in true Canadian fashion, signs off, peace and love. Thanks, Robert. How about this one from Scott, who says, this Allan Inquiry, it's akin to like a hardcore QAnon conspiracy theorist getting money from like a richer hardcore Q conspiracy theorist and then being told to go find the golden goose. That's what this was. It was a wild goose chase. And unfortunately, it's like having the QAnon conspiracy being debunked and then having the originator, like the problem creator, unmasked to being a troll from 4chan. And then people still believe the conspiracy. In spite of all the evidence, they'll believe that foreign money is the reason that they're losing their jobs, not the changing landscape of, I don't know, global investment due to climate change. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make that horse accept the fact that Jason Kenney is a grifter. That from Scott, the Patreon boss. Attaboy, Scotty. This one from Greg, who says this equalization conversation centered around Alberta getting its fair share, which sort of devolves to Eastern provinces buying foreign oil over Canadian. He says, can we set the record straight here? Provinces do not buy oil. Greg says foreign oil is bought by corporations who use it in their refineries. The 2 refineries in evil Quebec are owned by Suncor and Valero. He says Valero's head office is in Texas. Suncor's refinery outside Montreal still uses foreign oil, and for the most part, pre-2015 was run entirely on foreign oil. Their head office located in Calgary. And then there's Irving Oil's refinery that just received its first barrel from Alberta ever in 2020. Does anybody ever come out and call on the individual companies? No. Well, minus real talk. He says, let me be blunt, Greg says. The enemy is not Eastern provinces. It's not Quebec. The anger and frustration should be directed at the corporations. They're doing what they want to maximize profit. Oil and gas corporations fund organizations like Canada Action, who spread disinformation, and they sow Western anger toward the Eastern provinces. It's a distraction tactic, and it's time that Canadians knew the truth. Greg says if Albertans actually want change, they need to pressure oil and gas corporations for a better deal. That from Greg. And this one comes with a language warning, which is saying something. This one from Isabel, who says every single anti-vaxxer that ran to get the shot as soon as you were personally vaccinated, this one's for you, you full of shit. She says, you didn't care about organ transplants getting canceled. You didn't care about life-changing surgeries being postponed. It was your bowling league. It was drinks with the crew. It was the hockey season that finally made it worth the risk. She says the rest of us stayed hunkered down, waiting for you to come to your senses, away from family, funerals, weddings, grads, holidays, school, work. Our entire lives had to shrink with awful consequences. All of this to say, if you waited until you got your $100 selfish fucker bonus, or you couldn't get into a restaurant, or you might lose your job, like many of you did when you were stomping around harassing healthcare professionals, let's be honest, you were bullshitting us the whole time. You wouldn't have caved unless it was inconvenient. Anyway, says Isabel, thanks for finally finding a reason to get vaxxed, you bunch of selfish, ungrateful, entitled, terrible fucking humans. Between your refusal to be part of the solution and the misinformation you're spreading, the odds are more likely that you personally may have literally caused somebody's death. The fact that you were willing to allow that, even a mere possibility, should have rendered all of your health benefits null. For anybody still refusing the shot, you should be billed for the exorbitant cost of saving your useless ass. Isabel says, by the way, this is not meant in any way to go toward people who are unable to receive or access the vaccine. That's why anybody can. Anybody that can should. Because of these people here, she says, sorry, not sorry. XOXO, Isabel! Trash talk comes from emails sent to us. These are real people, real talkers that take the time to email talk@ryanjesperson.com. Coming up next week on the show, you may have heard of some of these guests. Ian Hannah-Mansing, Mark Moose, Messier, and Bruce McCullough from Kids in the Hall. Have a great weekend, everybody. Tell all your friends about Real Talk, and we'll see you soon.